I think a leader has to kind of like collect some clues, keep their eyes and ears open, start to form a picture of what's happening, not placing blame, not pointing fingers.
Well, welcome to Exude Human Capital Consulting's Hold On, Let Me Close My Door, the podcast that brings real stories from real professionals with real solutions to you. Join us as we navigate the ever-changing workplace with Allison DeFlorio, co-founder and managing partner of Exude Human Capital, and special guest.
Welcome to Hold On, Let Me Close My Door. I'm Allison DeFlorio, co-founder and managing partner of Exude Human Capital, here with a fantastic guest to talk about a topic that I'm sure many of our listeners are dealing with, and that's around what do you do when your team feels like it's out of tune? Things just don't seem to be moving together, or someone's hitting a bad note periodically. Our guest today is Michael Brenner, founder and CEO of Right Chord Leadership. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Allison. It's a pleasure to be here.
Michael, I remember the first time I met you was I had the pleasure of being in an audience when you were presenting to a SHRM symposium. And I was struck by how you combined your passion and expertise in music and related it to how leaders can effectively lead teams. Can you share a bit with our listeners about your background and the work that you do today?
Sure. So I've been in the learning and development space now for almost 25 years. Um, Having pivoted from the world of advertising, I was an advertising copywriter in the 90s, writing ad copy for SEPTA and Reader's Water Ice and other uh, uh, local and national clients, but then developed a fascination about sort of the psychology of the workplace and what makes for an effective leader versus an ineffective leader, what makes for a high performance team versus a mediocre team. I suppose largely based on my experience in various ad agencies, and I was seeing what was effective and what was ineffective. So I spun out of advertising and I pursued learning and development, got a degree in adult learning and leadership, a doctorate in adult learning and leadership, um, and been doing it ever since. So I started Right Chord Leadership in 2014, 2015, something like that. And the genesis of that idea, really the inspiration for that idea came from someone else, a mentor of mine who helped me to see the parallels between the world of music, which was my background. I've been playing music since I was a kid, and the world of business and organizations. And he helped me to see the connections between the two and how I could bring that to life given my unique background. So Right Chord Leadership was created, and I continue to leverage language and metaphors and examples from the world of music to shed light on the dynamics of the organization.
That's great. And I'm excited for you to share a little bit more about that in just a moment. I want to share, kind of set some context for the conversation for today. And I don't think anything I'm about to share is news to anyone listening. We're living in rather contentious times. We have a negative national discourse that we're kind of, whether we want to be involved in it or not, we hear it on the news, we see it, we hear people talking. We have some might call rather contentious election coming up in the next few weeks. And all of this impacts our employees who have to come into work and be productive during these, what we might describe as highly emotional times.
Sure.
And I'm sure that can impact, we see it impact, I know it impacts the clients we serve, the employees of the clients we serve. From your perspective, you developed something called the chords model,
Yes.
and that includes harmony as one of its elements. Why does harmony matter in the workplace?
Well, it's a great question. The chords model is a framework I developed a few years ago in an attempt to sort of capture the secret sauce, if you will, to borrow another metaphor, from the secret sauce that I have experienced as hallmarks of high performance teams. And I landed on, based on my experience, as well as all the things I've read over the years, I've landed on six key notes, if you will. So there's that musical language again. And the six notes form the acronym chords. So the C is for communication. The H, as you mentioned, stands for the note of harmony. The O stands for ownership, or that sense of accountability. The R stands for respect. The D is for direction. And the S is for support. And in my experience, leaders and teams that are playing all six notes, so to speak, tend to have a lot of success. uh, Leaders and teams who may be playing only five of the six notes, not terrible, but there may be an opportunity for improvement. Four or fewer, and you start seeing some dysfunction show up in the team, and then the fewer notes you play, the worse your results are. So to focus on that second note of harmony, and your question is why is harmony important? I think it's because, well, not I think, I know it's because we all have different autobiographies, if you will. Our autobiographies are filled with everything that makes us unique, all of our fears and aspirations and hopes and dreams and our backgrounds and our political leanings and our family upbringing, you name it, everything that makes us unique. And it's important to realize that no single autobiography, if you will, is identical to anybody else's. Yet we are often thrust together on a team and expected to work in collaboration when we're coming from very different, we're reading from very different owners' manuals, if you will. Um, to compound the fact that we have very different owners' manuals or autobiographies, very different ways of viewing the world and showing up in the world, we also have what's been called a negativity bias. So negative things tend to stick with us more than positive things. So we have a tendency to ascribe the very worst intentions to people far before we might, apply the very best intentions, just kind of the way we're wired. So when you put all that together, it's so important for leaders and organizations to try to create, harmony out of all those disparate views and perspectives and backgrounds. And how you do that is no great secret, but I think it is one of the hallmarks of high performance teams, the level of harmony that one can achieve on a team, given how different we all are.
And that's, I love the way you frame that. And I think about the impact to a business. I read a stat recently that conflict or teams out of harmony cost US businesses something to the tune of $359 billion a
Wow.
year
Yeah, it's
in lost
astounding.
productivity and other impacts to the business. So if we know that the current state of our country is pretty divided, and there's natural tension before an employee even comes into the workplace, right? That you're just
Sure.
experiencing. Whether you're experiencing it directly or you're witnessing, you're still experiencing that tension. How can you foster an environment of harmony in times like this? And I also think when some of our workplaces are not fully back, so you're dealing with this strife, if you will, in a hybrid environment or a remote environment or perhaps an on-site environment. But how do you begin to build harmony?
Yeah, that's a huge question. What I would say is, even though the note of harmony is a single note in the chords model, the other five play a key role in either creating harmony or disharmony. So what I would say is, um, the recognition, first of all, and maybe it's kind of obvious, but what I've said a moment ago, the recognition that we are all operating from different autobiographies, and if we're able to leverage our differences for positive outcomes rather than allow our differences to lead to conflict. That's very important. Now, of course, that is sort of counterintuitive because, back in the day when our ancestors were living in caves, if we came across somebody who was different from us or from a different cave than us, we would probably see them as an enemy, as an existential threat, and there would be, wars between the clans and so forth. So that we're kind of hardwired to be suspicious of the stranger, and that's why we tend to bond with people with whom we share commonalities, right? Oh, you like imported beer, I like imported beer. Hey, let's be best friends. So this is kind of hardwired in us. So what we need to do is become more comfortable with difference. And I think the way you do that is that note of R, respect. In other words, I might see things differently than you. I might have very different beliefs than you. But ultimately, if we exhibit mutual respect for one another, we can be reasonably confident that we can navigate through any disagreement or conflict we might have. So I think, it's been said that respect is the glue, if you will, or the cement that holds together the best organizations. Out of respect comes trust, out of respect comes empathy. I think that's really important. So rather than vilify the those who are different from us or may have a different perspective, we want to be more open and receptive. And that's just overcoming like thousands of years of hard wiring. It's not our natural default mode. I think the other thing that leads to harmony is along those same lines is an understanding that we all have different work styles, if you will, different temperaments, if you will. So I found a lot of success working with teams and doing like say disc,
Mhm.
right? Where the members of an intact work team can actually discover what their disc style is. And that elevates the conversation because instead of labeling one person as, oh my gosh, I wish they're so lazy. I wish they would just, get off their backside and get some work done. Well, maybe they just have a different style than you. Maybe they're a little bit more laid back. Maybe they're a little bit more casual. When you have a better understanding of work styles, you realize that it's not that you don't label somebody as some stereotypical characteristic. You just have a better understanding that that's just how they operate. That's just how they function, and that's okay because once you understand that, that elevates our empathy and our recognition. And I think we're better able to work with people who are different from us. But it really starts with that awareness piece. And then another aspect of harmony, I think, is just that support. And as leaders, giving people the tools and the resources and the encouragement and the feedback that they need to feel good about their work. Um, Lacking that, if you're not getting any feedback or your boss is continually, breathing down your neck, you're not feeling good about your work, you're disengaged, that's going to foment a conflict. It's going to foment disengagement. People are going to start, kind of snapping at each other potentially. And so we want to cultivate cultures where people feel appreciated, valued, where they feel their voice is heard, and that they have the support they need to do the very best work that they can. So those are just a few thoughts in terms of creating harmony in the workplace. It's obviously a huge undertaking, but I think the chords model is a good place to start.
Great. And I love the way you talked about using a tool, an assessment tool, or talking about the the more objective issue about perhaps the way we work, our work style or our communication style
That's right.
versus the issue at hand, because that gives some people something tangible to be able to work on. I can adjust my work style. I can adjust my communication style. I can't change the way you think,
That's
but
right.
I can adjust how I respond to what you say. I think there's tremendous value in that. I also think, it makes me think some managers, many managers, and many leaders are not comfortable in a space where there is tension or conflict that is not necessarily work related
Hmm.
occurring on their team. So, if that's an issue, what can leaders do to get, let's say, a functioning team that has kind of gone off of it? They're a little out of tune. What are a couple of steps that they can take to pull that team back on track?
I think the note of C, communication, is critical. I hear way more often than not that people are not getting the right communication at the right time as frequently as they need to have it, or they would like to have it. Often there's just kind of a communication void or vacuum at the top, and people are kind of trying to do their best without the communication that they might need. So I think, and again, this is not rocket science, but I think being transparent and being open and honest and candid with your team and not adopting what I call the hope and pray strategy that the conflict will just kind of go away miraculously on its own, but just being open, like maybe gathering the team together and saying, I've observed some things lately, and not accusatory, not attacking. It's like these are some things that have me a little concerned, and I think we should all talk about it, and in a atmosphere of mutual respect and openness. Let's talk about some of the challenges we're facing. um, in anticipation of this contentious election, if I was leading a team, I would probably say, hey, we should probably talk about what is reasonable discourse on our team and what crosses the line into unreasonable discourse. I mean, have that conversation. It's one thing for the lead. It's funny. I just got something the other day, Allison, from Penn State, where I do some teaching, and it was this very, very long email exactly about this topic, about how the university is going to deal with discourse and um, um, you know uh, a volatile conversation, on the campus, and what it was, what it designated as acceptable and what it designated as not acceptable. And I was like, that's great. I mean, they went right for it and they spelled it out. And I think clarity of messaging is very important. So let's talk about this together. Don't just, if you're a leader, don't just mandate this is the way it's going to be. Have that conversation. If there's somebody on your team who's particularly, kind of uh, difficult or challenging, you have to step into that space and have that so-called difficult or hard conversation. Um, Oftentimes, in my experience, people accuse one person of being the reason why everything is going off the rails. That's hardly ever the case. It's usually a multitude of factors. So, like a good detective, I think a leader has to kind of like collect some clues, keep their eyes and ears open, start to form a picture of what's happening, not placing blame, not pointing fingers, not putting it all on the shoulders of one bad apple, which I hear all the time, but to really try to develop as accurate a picture as possible of what's going on and do what any good detective or doctor does, do a diagnosis, and then come up with your thoughts about what needs to happen and then share that with the team. Allow for space for response. And I think only in the space of open, honest, respectful dialogue can any team be brought back, onto the righteous path, if you will, playing the right chords, if you will.
Yeah, that's I you said so many things that I was jotting down to reinforce. And that first piece around, transparency and communication, and communicate frequently. I will butcher this quote, but I remember hearing someone say once, you may not be able to trust the information because that could change, but you have to be able to trust the person who's giving you the information. And so, as a leader or a manager, I, I may tell you something that I do believe to be true today, and it's going to change tomorrow. But I also commit that I will tell you tomorrow if I'm advised that it's changed. And that's so important in these chaotic times.
Yeah,
And
because
the other
gossip and innuendo just sort of grows like a mold in the void, in a communication void. So I think what you just said is, good, bad, or indifferent. I'm going to be open with sharing what I know. There may be some things that I'm not privileged to share with you, and you have to understand that. But where I can share and be open and transparent, you have my commitment that I will be. I think that goes a really long way toward, creating the kind of team or organization that people really want to work for. But anyway, I cut you off.
No,
Finish.
no, no, that's fascinating. And I know in when we work with managers, we'll often say, keep it simple. Here's what I know. Here's what I don't know. And here's when I'll get back to you with the things that I don't know as soon, or an update on the things that I don't know, so that it's very organized. The
Yes.
other thing you said, which I think is really interesting, is, the leader has to be aware, recognize, and step in and have the conversation. And I think that's sometimes where this falls down a bit, where
Sure.
some leaders have the experience and the confidence and the skill to do that, and others get very uncomfortable about perhaps saying the wrong, thinking they're going to say the wrong thing, or do I really have a right to do that? They question their own role
Hmm.
in in intervening
Yes.
for the betterment of the team. And I think that that's something that, for anyone listening, we will say, and I believe you'll agree with me here, invest in your managers. I think this is a time in the evolution of the workplace. It's always good to invest in your managers, but I think now more than ever, managers really need to be trained on how to proactively and reactively address conflict in the workplace, and address, and when I say conflict, it's, that's on a scale. I'm not talking
Sure. Yes.
every single issue is conflict, but when you hear these things, if they're repeatedly gone unaddressed, then they do roll into a snowball that becomes a boulder, and then you have an issue that's impacting the team. And
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, one of the most popular, workshops, what have you, requests I have from my own clients is that very thing, is how we have managers, and not only just new managers, but it's, seasoned
right.
managers just struggle with that very thing. And I think the reason for that is clear. It only takes one bad experience trying to be open and honest, giving feedback to somebody, for us to say like, oh, I'm not doing that again. It's just not worth it. So, they just kind of like, um, chop my head off, if you will, and I don't need that aggravation again. So I'll just hope and pray that it resolves on its own. This skill is of being able to lean into that space and have that conversation where you are conveying, whether it's a performance issue or a behavioral issue, and be able to bring that up in a way that does not make the other person defensive, or they don't feel like
Mhm.
they're being attacked, yet you are sort of conveying what could be construed as, negative feedback, although I prefer constructive feedback. That is not something we are born with. That is something that people either feel very comfortable doing, and others
Mhm.
do not feel comfortable doing that at all. The good news is that there are plenty of methodologies out there that will kind of walk you through how to do just that. And that's kind of what I teach my clients. I got certified on one of those methodologies many years ago, and it served me very well, not only in my professional life, but in my personal life as well. One of the things we tend to do is we wait until we just can't take it anymore, and then we explode on the person, and then we wonder why that didn't go well.
Right.
What I teach instead is you have to do some homework. You have to think about what are your intentions in sharing this feedback with this person. And like a great chess master, you need to anticipate 2, 3, 4, 5 moves ahead. If this person shuts down and disengages, what am I going to do? If this person, attacks me, and not literally, but just like gets in my
Verbally.
face and
Mhm.
says,
Mhm.
verbally, "Hey, who do you think you're talking?" I need to be ready. You need to be ready. You hope it goes well. You hope the person is receptive, but you need to be ready in case they're not. You also have to be ready in case your best intentions in having the conversation get derailed in the middle of the conversation, where somebody says, "I don't know why you're talking to me. You should be talking to Joe. He's the one who blah 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 blah." Right, and off we go. There are specific skills that we can practice and strengthen with regard to having these so-called hard conversations. But we have to stress and encourage our people to expose themselves to this material. And I've worked with enough people who have told me that was invaluable. That is a practical skill that I can take back with me and use to create harmony on the team. And so I think that's very important, particularly important nowadays where we really work in a very fraught environment.
We do.
And it's only
And
getting fraughter, if that's a word.
Roger, the word for
More
the day.
fraught.
And I think I love what you just said, and I I just feel that sometimes there's an assumption made that when somebody becomes a manager, they come equipped with the
Great
skill
point. Great
to
point.
to communicate effectively and to have difficult conversations. And in my experience, and clearly in your experience, that is simply not the case. So that's something that can be a miss for organizations if they're relying on managers to operationalize strategy and to be the communicators of company information. If they're not strong, if they don't have that competency built and they're not given the right skills and tools to effectively lead, it can be very challenging for them.
Yeah, and I don't know why we would assume that managers would necessarily have these skills innately. I mean, some, I guess, because of their personalities are maybe more comfortable, with some of this stuff. But most folks are promoted not for their people skills or their interpersonal skills, but for their technical skills.
Right.
You do your job really well, and so now all of a sudden we're going to put you in a position of leading people. Well, those are two very different skill sets.
Hmm.
You want to talk about IQ and EQ, emotional intelligence, the ability to navigate through stressful times and communicate effectively and have a high sense of self-awareness and where you may be helping or hindering your own performance as a leader, demonstrating adequate empathy with people who may not share your point of view, forging strong, trusting relationships. I mean, that to me, not to take anything away from the technical skills necessary to do the job, but that's sort of like, that's kind of obvious.
Hmm.
It's all this other, like, how do you deal with people and all of their autobiographies, right?
And
That's really where the rubber meets the road, and why we would ever think that a manager would just naturally have those skills, I think is, just, um, I don't want to say foolish, but like you said, it's a misnomer, it's a myth.
yeah.
We can teach these skills and learn these skills and practice these skills and strengthen these skills, much like we would learn how to ride a bike or play a musical instrument.
Mhm.
But we have to recognize that, hey, we have to expose our people to this content because it typically, you know, otherwise, sometimes learn it the hard way. you know,
Right. Right.
like I won't do that again. The school of hard knocks is
All right, Michael. Best tips for leaders to prepare to lead effectively over these next few months where we have to strap on our seatbelts. What are those best tips?
Well, I would kind of go back to what I said a few minutes ago, which is for the leader to become very clear on what is tolerable speech versus intolerable speech and what is tolerable behavior versus intolerable behavior.
Mhm.
And that's going to be different for every leader and every team. So how I suppose, Allison, you're referring to political discourse specifically with the upcoming
And
election.
and all the emotions that are wrapped around that, knowing kind of where we sit as a country right now.
Yeah, the metaphor, I'm a big fan of metaphors, obviously. The metaphor that I often use, particularly in jazz music, because I'm a jazz musician, is the the boundary between freedom and limitation, right? So if I'm playing a solo as a jazz musician, if I'm too limited in my playing, then my solo is going to sound very stiff and academic and uninspiring. If I'm too free on the other side, right? If I'm too free in my solo, it's just going to sound like noise because I'm just kind of playing whatever I want without any thought as to what the rest of the band is playing behind me. So somewhere in the middle, if you think of a Venn diagram, right? The perfect balance between freedom and limitation, I think holds true in an organization and on a team. And the leader needs to determine where in that Venn diagram the meeting of freedom and limitation is when it comes to how we interact with each other in our discourse. So too much limitation, what you don't want to do is say, I forbid any discussion about the election or politics, or I don't know that that's the right way to go, nor do I think that anything goes, you can just talk about anything you want in a way that has no bearing on people's respect or dignity. No, I don't think that's the way to go either. We have to find the sweet spot, the middle ground that allows for discourse to take place, because I think that's very important. But where's that line? Where does it cross over into inappropriate and disrespectful and undignified? And I think that if I was a leader, I would really be giving a lot of thought to where that line is. And then once I got clear about it in my own head, I would share it with my team. And I would say, how does this land with you? How does this feel? I don't have all the answers. This is how it feels to me. What do you all think? I would gather some feedback. I'd make some modifications to the so-called policy, if I had to, and then I'd roll it out and say, do we all commit to following these guidelines so that we can have, a respectful and trusting and collaborative work environment that is not shutting down all discourse, but it is allowing a sufficient amount of it to flourish. Where is that sweet spot? Where's that line? And I think that's the best advice I can give. And then keep our eyes and ears open for things that may cross the line, and be willing to have those conversations. Say, hey, I couldn't help overhearing the other day when you were berating Jim for his political views. And I thought we agreed, right, that we were, not going to do that sort of thing. Well, Jim, blah, blah, blah. Well, I understand that, but I think we're trying to create a culture here, an environment here where people, don't have to put up with that kind of stuff. There's enough here for us to worry about than that. Right. So that's kind of how that works. That's sort of what I would do.
Right.
Um, Short of that, I think uh you know always coming back to that idea of accountability and owning the things we say and do, which is the note O in the chords model. And so if you said something out of line, if you did something out of line, don't blame others, don't put it on other people. They made me say it. No, you said it, you did it, own it, and let's talk about it. Right? What motivated you to say that? There might be some things going on under the hood that you as a leader, you need to look under that hood, and you need to find out what's really going on there. So it takes some courage. It takes some willingness sometimes to get under the hood and get your hands dirty. But that's the only way I know of to really make sure that we don't go spinning off into a direction that doesn't serve us as a team or an organization.
Great advice. And thank you so much for sharing your time and expertise with our listeners.
Oh, it's
Uh,
my pleasure.
Michael Brenner, founder and CEO of Right Chord Leadership. On behalf of everyone at Exude Human Capital, we're really happy that you were our guest. So thank you so much. And I want to share a quote that's on your tagline that sums up the message you deliver, which is when people work in harmony, great things happen.
Yes, indeed. That is the tagline of the company, and I believe that wholeheartedly. And hopefully that came through in my responses today. It's not it's not a warm and fuzzy, can't we all get along harmony? It's more the type of harmony where I may be playing a note, I may be playing a certain note, you may be playing a different note, someone over there may be playing a different note, and that's okay, but we all have to be reading off the same sheet music, right? Otherwise, you get bedlam and chaos. So it's okay to have your own perspectives, your own opinions, your own points of view. In fact, I would encourage that. To me, that's a hallmark of a healthy team. But how let's make sure that we leverage all that for good stuff and not allow it to get in the way of what we need to do together. That's really a foundational kind of creed for me, if you will.
Wonderful. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And
Thank you for having me, Allison. It was great. It was a lot of fun.
great. And to all our listeners, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.